A police officer is killed and another left critical in an attack at the US Capitol. The suspect rammed his car into officers and attacked them with a knife. He was later shot dead. Police say it doesn't appear to be terror-related.
It is with a very, very heavy heart that I announce one of our officers has succumbed to his injuries.
Also on the programme, warnings from a group of MPs against making COVID passports compulsory. They could be needed for things like the pub, concerts and going to the football. But campaigners say that would be discriminatory. A woman in her 80s dies after being attacked by two escaped dogs in a garden. And the deepest dive in the world reveals the world's deepest wartime shipwreck.
This is ITV News with Charlene White.
A police officer guarding the US Capitol building has been killed after a car was rammed into a security barrier in Washington, D.C. The driver was shot dead after attacking the officers with a knife. A second police officer is said to be in a critical condition. Our US correspondent Emma Murphy is in D.C.
The citadel of American democracy under assault once more. This time a lone attacker of unknown motivation. A few minutes after 1 o'clock, he drove this car towards the North Barricade outside the US Capitol. He didn't stop and headed directly towards a reinforced barrier. As police tried to stop him, he ran from the car armed with a knife.
He did not respond to verbal commands. The suspect did start lunging toward U.S. Capitol police officers, at which time U.S. Capitol police officers fired upon the suspect. At this time, the suspect has been pronounced deceased, and it is with a very, very heavy heart that I announce one of our officers has succumbed to his injuries.
The National Guard, already present here as a result of heightened security since January, were dispatched to help. Neither the House nor Senate were in session at the time, and at this stage it doesn't seem to be a terrorist attack, domestic or foreign.
It does not appear that he is known to the Capitol Police or the Metropolitan Police Department at this time.
Is this a terrorism-related?
Sir?
Is this a terrorism-related incident?
It does not appear to be terrorism-related, but obviously we'll continue to investigate to see if there's some type of nexus along those lines.
It is another dreadful day for the US Capitol Police. One of their own was killed in the January the 6th attack on the Capitol, and two have since taken their lives. Today, another member of their police family is dead and a second injured. The dead officer has tonight been identified as William Evans. He had been with the force for 18 years. The President and First Lady have now issued a statement offering their deepest condolences to the family of the slain officer and their prayers for the officer who is said to be in a very serious condition in a hospital a short distance from here. You will be able to see just behind me, that's where the cordon begins and where the car is being kept. It's subject to a very significant forensic investigation now. In the last few minutes, a tow truck was taken in and it's expected that it will be removed shortly. Of course, what they're able to find in that car will give them some indication as to the motivation of the attacker. And at this moment, Homeland Security are briefing the President on exactly what they know so far about what happened here and what it means for the safety of this building and for the future safety of those who will guard it.
Emma, thank you. A group of more than 70 MPs is warning that making COVID passports compulsory to go to concerts, sports events or the pub would be divisive and discriminatory. Ministers say no final decision has been made, but they're looking into trialling it soon. They'd be to prove you've already recovered from the virus, have been vaccinated or have had a recent negative test. John Ray reports.
Easter on the Lancashire coast, and even in a town noted famously for fresh air and fun, there's not much to draw a crowd. And there's been nothing to laugh at in Blackpool's comedy club for months. So they take seriously the idea of a COVID passport to bring back the punters.
We would comply if one was brought in. If it meant that we were able to open sooner and safer, then absolutely, I'd completely agree with it.
Spectators at football matches, beginning with an FA Cup semi-final.
I don't want to hear no chat about numbers.
Next month's Brit Music Awards. Both could be part of pilot schemes to allow us to stand shoulder to shoulder again.
It is about looking at ways of proving that you're COVID secure, whether you've had a test or had the vaccine. Clearly no decisions have been made on that because we have to weigh up different factors, the ethical considerations and so on, but it may be a way of ensuring that you can get more people back doing the things they love.
In the hospitality and entertainment industries, there are glimmers of life. Some theatres will reopen next month, though not to full capacity.
London's West End has barely staged a show in a year, but if its future depends on COVID certificates, then there's a plot twist coming. A growing political rebellion by those who see not passports back to freedom, but a one-way ticket to a future of division and discrimination.
We will end up with 2 queues at the supermarket, the football stadium, the pub. We'll be giving powers to bullying bouncers or bosses. And history suggests when you go down this segregation path, it's very, very difficult to come back.
So is proof of vaccine or COVID-free status an extra price worth paying for a seat in a restaurant or at the cinema? In Blackpool and across the nation, lockdowns then cannot come quickly enough. But COVID could change the way we live for the foreseeable future. John Ray, ITV News.
Well, our political reporter Hannah Miller has joined us in the studio. Hannah, how does the government think this will even work?
Well, we're waiting for the details on Monday, Charlene, but one of the options that's being considered would be to use the NHS app to give people so-called certificates to show that they've had either a vaccine, a negative test, or they already have antibodies. That sounds quite simple until you think, OK, who would check? What if someone says no? What if somebody hasn't downloaded the app? And as well as the practical considerations, the government also has to take serious stock of the political considerations here. That group of 70 MPs who are united against this stretches from the former Conservative leader Ian Duncan-Smith to the former Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn. And we're in a position where the current Labour leader, Keir Starmer, really holds the keys as to whether or not the government could get something like this through. He hasn't said yes, he hasn't said no, but he has said he doesn't want it to be left to individual businesses to decide. We'll find out on Monday, but we're a long way from the idea that this isn't going to happen at all.
OK, Hannah, thank you. Well, more countries have been added to England's travel red list. International visitors who've been in or through the Philippines, Pakistan, Kenya and Bangladesh in the previous 10 days will be refused entry. UK residents arriving will have to self-isolate in a government-approved hotel for 10 days. And the Prime Minister has warned people not to meet up indoors with other households this Easter, even if they're both vaccinated. Boris Johnson says vaccines do not give 100% protection. A woman in her 80s has died after being attacked by 2 escaped dogs in the West Midlands. Police were called after the woman was found in a garden suffering from serious injuries in Rowley Regis this afternoon. She was pronounced dead at the scene. Police said the dogs managed to get into her garden before attacking her. A 43-year-old local man is being held. The trial of the policeman accused of murdering George Floyd has heard from a senior detective that kneeling on a suspect's neck would be considered deadly force. Derek Chauvin's colleagues have been called by the prosecution. His supervisor told the court that the officer should have stopped holding down Mr. Floyd once he was in handcuffs on the ground, as Robert Moore reports.
The jury in the trial of the police officer accused of the murder of George Floyd has now heard dramatic new evidence.
Hello, 2:30 here.
Police officer Derek Chauvin is heard in his patrol car telling a supervisor
Gonna call you and have you come out to our scene here.
that Mr. Floyd has resisted arrest.
Not really, but we just had to hold the guy down. He was going crazy. Wouldn't go in, shutting off for the moment. Wouldn't go in the back of the Squad.
The supervisor pulled up a short time later to assess the situation.
We can try. They're pretty, they're all pretty hostile. Okay.
David Pluger, now retired, is a witness for the prosecution. And critically, he passed judgment on Chauvin's decision to keep his knee on Mr. Floyd's neck.
Sir, based on your review of the body-worn camera footage, do you have an opinion as to when the restraint of Mr. Floyd should have ended in this encounter?
Yes.
What is it?
When Mr. Floyd was no longer offering up any resistance to the officers, they could have ended the restraint.
And that was after he was handcuffed and on the ground and no longer resisting?
Correct.
Several officers then moved on to the hospital to check on George Floyd's condition. Only then did the supervisor learn how Mr. Floyd had been restrained.
Do you recall what the defendant told you?
He said he knelt on Floyd or knelt on his neck, something of that nature. I don't recall his exact words.
Richard Zimmerman, a veteran homicide detective who arrived at the scene a few hours after Mr. Floyd's death, was asked today a simple question by the prosecution. Had he ever been taught to push a knee into a suspect's neck when they are in a handcuffed and prone position?
No, I haven't.
Is that, if that were done, would that be considered force?
Absolutely.
What level of force might that be?
That would be the top tier, the deadly force.
Why?
Because of the fact that if your knee is on a person's neck, that can kill him.
This trial is expected to last several more weeks before a verdict that is seen as a highly charged judgment on America's criminal justice system. Robert Moore, ITV News, Washington.
Before we go, a submarine and its two-person crew have dived 4 miles down to capture incredible pictures of the world's deepest known shipwreck. It's the first time a manned submersible has been able to reach the USS Johnston in the Pacific Ocean. The Navy destroyer was sunk in 1944 after a fierce battle with Japanese warships. American explorer Victor Vescovo's sub has a 3-inch thick titanium hull, allowing it to dive deep enough to shed new light on the legendary World War II wreck. Well, that's it from us tonight. So from all of the team here, do enjoy what's left of Good Friday. Night, night.